Control the kitchen chaos and streamline your back-of-house operations with Restaurant Technologies. Restaurant Technologies' Total Oil Management Solution is the end-to-end automated oil management system that delivers, filters, monitors, and recycles your cooking oil, taking the dirtiest job out of the kitchen and lets your employees focus on more important tasks. The Total Oil Management Solution helps prevent the burns, spills, slips, and falls that come with traditional oil management. Restaurant Technologies gives you and your employees peace of mind among the chaos of a commercial kitchen and can maximize efficiency for your business. And no upfront cost. Learn more about Restaurant Technologies and all the solutions they offer by visiting rti-inc.com or call 888-796-4997.
Hello there. Welcome to Menu Talk. I'm Pat Cobe, Senior Menu Editor of Restaurant Business, and I'm here with Bret Thorn.
True. I am Bret Thorn, Senior Food and Beverage Editor of Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality. Hi, everybody. And how are you, Pat?
Yeah. How are you doing, Bret? What's up?
I'm okay. Relatively, I think, quiet week last week, although I believe I mentioned that I was going to go to the Del Frisco's Magnum Bash. And I'd gone many years ago and thought it was sort of a silly event where, you know, people were showing off how great their Magnum wines were. And in this case, I went with a friend of mine who works with a wine distributor. So I just hung out with these wine distributor people. They were very nice and interesting. And the steak was better than I remember it being. I had a ribeye that was really delicious. And a shrimp cocktail that was okay. In general, I think if you're going to go to Del Frisco's, focus on the meat and not so much on the seafood. But they have a signature lemon cake that's also delicious, and they had a chocolate cake that was exactly what you want a chocolate cake to be. You know, good hearty steakhouse food. And actually, their mashed potatoes were kind of creative. They had more stuff in them. I don't remember exactly what the stuff was. Maybe it's Italian, something like that. Nothing crazy or radical, but it seemed a little bit more intentional than potatoes often are at a steakhouse. So that was cool.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah. And then you and I went to a Taco Bell thing, right?
Yeah, we did. It was the introduction of 3 Crunchwrap Supremes that 3 emerging chefs had created for Taco Bell. And they were very different. One had Indian flavors, one had kind of Thai flavors, and the other was more Southwest desert flavors, I would characterize it as.
Yes. Well, yeah, and they were all really tasty. I don't think you got a chance to try them because it wasn't the best organized event. I hope Taco Bell takes that in the spirit in which it's intended. But I waited in line by their truck for 45 minutes to get my Crunchwraps. And I didn't even actually make it to the front of the line. One of the people in the communications team, as I was probably 5 minutes away from getting the Crunchwraps anyway, sort of skipped the line and handed me my Crunchwraps. But they were all quite different and really tasty, and reflected those 3 styles that you mentioned. And I'm a little skeptical that they'll be rolled out particularly widely because I don't know, although they were really good, and I think if they were actually brought into the restaurants, they'd be able to create them a lot more quickly than they were able to at that truck. And it was also given out at 2 different trucks the following day, and I haven't heard how that went. But I wonder if Taco Bell customers give Taco Bell permission to do Indian and Thai flavors. I think the Southwestern one, it's pretty heavily Mexican influence, so I think customers would respect that. But I don't know if anyone's going to go to Taco Bell to get something with cow soy aioli. That's a northern Thai curry with it.
Yeah, well, they did have to bring in a lot. I think they brought in 8 ingredients to extra, that weren't in their pantry just to make these. So I think operationally, I don't know if that would fly in the long run, but I think they like to. I mean, Taco Bell is probably one of the most experimental of the fast food chains, and they do try different flavors and different weird combinations like Cheez-Its and
That's true.
Crunchwraps. So,
I mean, they invented the Doritos Loco Taco, which
right.
like once they developed that, it seemed so obvious. Like, of course, why wouldn't you want to eat a taco in a Dorito shell? That's like obviously, and of course,
Yeah,
it did very
definitely.
well.
Yeah, I'm
So
sorry I
yeah,
didn't get to taste them. I think what they should have done, I mean, the truck was a really cool idea, for their two, launches the following days, but maybe they could have cut up a few into smaller pieces and let us all sample them while we were inside rather than waiting for the truck.
yeah, I think that would have been a good idea, especially since maybe if I really wanted to, I could eat three crunch wraps. I don't want to, and it's certainly not a healthy thing to do. And you kind of want to see them in their huge hexagonal form, but
Right.
they had them exhibited on display anyway, so that could have been
Yeah.
enough, and we could have gotten a little taste. And maybe they'll find like one flavor element that they can bring in, some sort of
Yeah.
new
That's what
sauce.
I think will happen.
I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. And then I wasn't done that day. I went to Williamsburg, a very hip neighborhood in Brooklyn, to a bar called Desert Five Spot, which is like a country and western themed bar. They have a mechanical bull you can ride. And Cava threw a party there celebrating the launch of their garlic ranch pita chips.
Oh.
And it was only now when I was looking at the scented candle that they gave me that ranch is, that's a place where cowboys raise cattle. And I mean, I never think of ranch dressing as being like that. And I didn't understand why I was at this weird country bull riding bar in Williamsburg. But now it's all falling into
It
place.
comes together. Yes.
And and they're good. The pita chips are
Hmm.
tasty. Speaking of Doritos, they have that kind of dust on them that gets stuff on your
Hmm.
fingers, and they're very flavorful, quite salty. And the corporate chef Owen Klein was there, and he said that was intentional, that they wanted to mimic sort of a Doritos kind of thing. And you're not just going to eat them. Probably you're going to dip them in hummus or whatever. And so,
Well, it's
so
good. They're good in bowls. They like some crunch to Kava's bowls. So
yeah,
that's how I would have them.
that would make sense. And they created two cocktails for the event. One was a variation on ranch water, which is Texan for tequila and soda, and a sort of cold brew espresso martini. And I tried both of those, and then the bartender looked at me, and he understood me so well. He looked at me, he said, "Whiskey on the rocks," and I said, "Yes." Although I had it with soda because I really, really love whiskey, and if I just have it neat or on the rocks, I drink it so fast
Mm.
that I get drunk. And if it's not an open bar, I also get broke. So whiskey soda is what I drink a lot of. A lot of whiskey highballs because they're
So
delicious.
when do you think ranch is going to, run out of its popularity, have its run? Because it is like everywhere, and it's been around for a long time, but all of a sudden it seems like ranch flavors are showing up in every kind of chain.
True. I think. I mean, it's endemic at this point, in the best
Mhm.
possible way, not like a disease. It's a condiment that people love, and for
Yeah.
years, people outside of New York have been dipping their pizza in it or squirting it on their pizza. We do not do that in New York very much, but elsewhere, it's a popular condiment. That way, obviously, you want to dip your mozzarella sticks or your fried zucchini or whatever in
Hmm.
them. Again, in New York, we're more likely to use marinara sauce, but it's a very popular condiment, and I think it's going to be here to stay. In fact, now that you mention it, it's kind of interesting that there aren't more ketchup flavored things. We just have ketchup. I mean, I've seen ketchup
Mm.
flavored potato chips, but I don't think I've seen
Yeah,
them.
I've seen ketchup potato chips, but
That's
yeah,
about
ranch
it.
is just so ubiquitous, and it is good. I'm not saying, I don't like it, but I just this week I think Burger King came out with this big ranch cup. So instead of getting
Oh,
like a 1 ounce cup with your burger or your fries, you now can get an 8 ounce cup in
yes, I
select
noticed that.
markets.
Yeah, it's a tub of ranch, and you can
Tub,
dip
yeah,
your Whopper in it or whatever. And they're only charging like $1 for it or something like that.
yeah.
Really good deal.
So. I guess that's really for ranch fans. They'll be very happy.
of which there are many. Although, I mean, it's just an experimental thing, right? It's only a limited.
Yeah, I think it's just a limited edition kind of thing that they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I was in Manhattan today to get some medical tests, and therefore went out and explored some food. I was not allowed to drink caffeine before the test, so I went to Bluestone Lane, which is a little coffee chain of I think 60 some odd locations, whose founder wanted to create an Australian style coffee house where they're warmer and they care about you, and it's like a place where you're a regular. And I went to the one in Astor Place, which is a very busy part of the East Village, and was skeptical that I'd be treated like anything other than like some rando walking in, which is exactly what it was. But in fact, I was sort of trying to see the menu board, which had pretty small print for a man of my advanced years, and they noticed and were good enough to point me to the handheld menus that I could look at. And I ordered a flat white, which is Australian for cappuccino. I don't think there's a difference between a flat white and a cappuccino. I think Starbucks tried to distinguish, but I don't know. But they spelled my name correctly. When they handed it to me, the guy who handed it to me gave me a little friendly wink and called me buddy or something. Yeah, something friendly. And it was a little bit friendlier than your average coffee house. So cool.
And I've never been to one. I know that, there are a few in New York, but I've never been to one.
Yeah, I hadn't either, which is why I went. And then I actually, before that, I stopped by a place called South of the Clouds, which is a direct translation of Yunnan, the Chinese province in southwestern China. Yun means cloud and Nan means south, so South of the Clouds. And I had a classic soup of theirs that's sometimes called monk jumps over the wall soup or jumps over the wall soup. At this place, they called it crossing the bridge soup. But basically, it's supposed to be so good that you go out of your way to get it. You cross a bridge or jump over a wall or whatever. And
so how was it? Was it worth jumping over a wall?
It was fine. I mean, it was a chicken broth, which I don't know is always the case, but it had actually really tasty little pork cracklings, and then beef and chicken and pork and fish all in the soup. I don't know that the fish was necessary in there for my palate, but it's pretty good, and I enjoyed that. And it's always nice. I'd actually had that soup in Yunnan province, but that was 1989, so I don't think I can really compare because I'm a different person with a different palate now. But I enjoyed it then, and I enjoyed it now.
Wow. So is that near Bluestone on Astor Place?
It is on 11th Street in the West Village.
Well, I had a nice weekend up at Cape Cod this weekend, and it was like the last hurrah of the summer, I guess, because I did have another lobster roll, this time a warm lobster roll, which was really good. It comes with, melted butter and a toasted roll, and you can dip, which seems to be something a lot of people like to do, is dip these days. So
what do they dip it in? Drawn butter?
In the melted butter.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I feel like that kind of Connecticut style lobster roll has enough butter already, but maybe not. Maybe I need more. That is the kind of lobster roll I like to eat. I think we discussed this before, that the one with the mayonnaise and the tarragon, I don't really care for it.
Well, at this particular place, it was called the Lobster Pot, and they actually didn't put the butter on the lobster, so you had to dip or put it on yourself.
You had to dip it.
Yeah, so you could customize it with the amount of butter you wanted.
I respect that.
It was a lot of fun. And then I also had something I've been craving all summer and just weren't available anywhere else I went. But they're whole belly clams, like fried, instead of just the strips where you see most places just do the strips. And these were the whole belly clams, and they were delicious. So I think I've had my summer fill of those of my favorite seafood things now.
I love fried clams. And because I went to college in New England, often on Fridays, there were fried clams.
Really? In the dining hall?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I ate them with some frequency. But they were not whole belly clams. They were strips, but still.
Yeah.
Fried clams.
Speaking of seafood, October is National Seafood Month.
Yes, it is.
And with that segue, I wanted to talk about the chef I interviewed last week, whose name is Sammy Mansour. He's an ambassador for Food for Climate League, and what they are doing as ambassadors are trying to promote sustainable seafood, but other forms of sea food like sea vegetables, which aren't very common. I mean, people sort of have heard a lot about sustainable seafood, but not as much about seaweeds and other sea vegetables. And then they're also really promoting bivalves, which are clams and mussels and things that, haven't really gotten a lot of play on restaurant menus outside of seafood restaurants. So it was really fun talking to him. So I was going to play a few clips.
Awesome.
That was the first step of learning about sustainable seafood, was how to source it, right? And that took years. It's not necessarily easy. It's very complex. But what happens is when you learn about what the complexities are, whether it's traceability or it's transparency or it's catch method, right? Like, originally you think, oh, farm raised is bad and wild caught is good. And it's like, none of these things are true. There's good farm raised and there's poor practices within farming, as we know. Just like there's good catch methods and then there's bad catch methods. And so learning what those are and why those are, you really get engulfed in something if you're paying attention. And so at a certain point, it is kind of the easiest part of it because there's like lists that you can check. There's trusted resources, whether those would be recommendations like Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch or eco certifications like BAP, which is uh, it's an eco cert that just means best aquaculture practices. It's a third party eco cert. But there's also, MSA, Marine Stewardship Council, sorry, MSC.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to play that as a reminder because people really are still so confused about between wild caught and farm raised and what's sustainable and how, species can come off the bad list when good practices are employed. So,
Right, like what happened with Chilean sea bass
right,
or
exactly.
swordfish. A number of stuff that at the turn of the century we weren't supposed to eat. But the thing about a lot of wild fisheries is give them some time and they will breed and restock. Other times it takes longer. Like there isn't any wild Atlantic salmon available commercially, and cod is really difficult because it fed two continents for 400 years, and now we need to take the time to replenish. But I don't know how many bad aquaculture practices there are anymore because of so many, especially of the large companies, have cleaned up their act, which is cool. And yes, there's the Marine Stewardship Council, there's Monterey Bay Aquarium, there's the aquaculture equivalent of the Marine Stewardship Council. I forget the exact name. It might be the Aquaculture Stewardship Council or something very straightforward like that. But because the Marine Stewardship Council is for, but yeah, there's access to stuff. And you mentioned bivalves like clams and mussels and oysters, which aren't just sustainable; they're regenerative. They leave the waterways better off than when they started, and they're really good for you.
Yeah. Well, and they're actually, a lot of them are farmed now too, but he talks about that later. So,
oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. I mean, you know a lot about it too, but one of he has a restaurant called Joyce Soul and Sea in Los Angeles. And so he talks a little bit about the sea vegetables and what he serves there in this next clip.
Cool.
So for starters, one of the things I like to point out with seafood is that it's sea vegetables too, right? Or seaweeds, as we commonly know them. Maybe some people like to call them vegetables. or plants because weeds doesn't sound good. To me, I think seaweed's cool. There's it's basically sea vegetables are a type of algae, and there's thousands of different kinds of edible sea vegetables out there, and they're very nutritious and delicious. And they're just like the difference between parsley or iceberg lettuce. Like they're not. It's not all one and the same. So I guess the work that we're doing right now at the Food for Climate League is we're creating like a literacy program for sea vegetables and bivalves specifically, because they have such a great ecological footprint. There are two things that bivalves in general, clams, oysters, and mussels are filter feeders. So it's a low impact, high reward food stuff to farm raise, and they're also really tasty and healthy. So there's a lot of benefits like that. And then it would be the same with the seaweeds. There is a good bit of filtration that happens through them, as well as carbon suck uh, from the environment.
Yeah, I guess he's getting into the cooking a little later, but it was really interesting to learn about how Food for Climate League is really promoting these sea vegetables now, and they're really not too hard to find as a restaurant chef. So he talks a little bit about that and also how he cooks them.
One of my favorite places to get living seaweeds is from I have a friend who is a marine biologist up in Monterey Bay, and he has a seaweed farm called Monterey Bay Seaweeds. He's one of the only people in the country right now, maybe even in the world, that does this, where he's growing, harvesting, and packing still living seaweeds. He usually keeps 4 or 5 different varieties around, like ogo, dulse, sea lettuce, sea grapes. He tinkers around with like finding interesting things that aren't necessarily on the market and growing them. And so he's even done things like sea truffles before. Um, and he packs and ships them in a method where they're under the impression it's low tide, and when you get them with some bay salt, and you reconstitute that and to make your own salt water brine, and you put them back in there, and you can hold them under refrigeration for a week, and they'll stay alive before the lack of sunlight kills them. But so what you have is this like really crisp, crunchy, briny, flavorful vegetable that's still living. So it has way more nutrients, and it brings a lot more texture and character. And so it's pretty easy to work with. And from there you could put it at, like, I like to put the the ogo seaweed in my Caesar salad to add like a briny crunch to something that usually gets that from like an anchovy. A friend of mine has made like a salsa with a variety of them before that I thought was fantastic. I've had a sauce vierge, which is like an Italian herb condiment made with them. And then, even just like doing a quick saute like you would on a spinach. I mean,
Really interesting. I mean, I guess they're not widely available to consumers, but I think it's really cool the way he's using them at Joyce, Soul, and Sea.
Well, I think if you go to like a grocery store, you can get those little seaweed salads that at least you can
Right.
in New York City. I love those. They're delicious. I will point out, and I just looked this up on the internet to make sure I was right. Uh, Seaweed is algae, and algae technically are not plants. They are protozoans because they don't have like roots and stems and leaves like that. They don't have the anatomy of plants, but they don't do photosynthesize. They're good for the environment, all of that. Just as long as we're defining things technically, sea vegetables are mostly not vegetables. They're algae.
That's really interesting. But I guess because they look like plants, more than protozoa that
Right.
people.
I mean, it's okay. Just like when people talk about plants, they include mushrooms. Mushrooms are fungus.
Right.
They're not plants, but it's splitting hairs. It's okay. And you should eat them. They're all good for you, and they're gentle on the environment.
Well, and now he's going to talk a little bit about bivalves and what he does with those.
Also,
So let me just play that.
I like to make this like marinated mussels toast. It's kind of like a riff on like a Spanish pan con tomate, which is just like tomato bread that you get in Spain. And I just like to make that, but char it up on the grill and do a nice layer of chopped garlicky tomatoes, but then put like a nice layer of marinated mussels that I'll do with like olive oil and Calabrian chilies and some garlic and some parsley and olive oil.
Instead of just doing mussels like a lot of people do, in the garlicky broth with frites and bread dunkers, he does it a little differently, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, and there are canned mussels or tinned mussels, as people like to say these days, that are available. Often they're smoked, and you can spread them on things. I believe Jose Andres has a line of smoked mussels or something like that.
Yeah.
And which makes them really easy for restaurants that kind of want to dip their toe in the bivalve water, so to speak.
And then he and his wife, who's actually a mixologist, did a cookbook together called Salt and Shore, and he talks a little bit about that. He and his wife traveled all over to all the coastal, I guess, locales in the U.S. and talked to fishermen and people raise some farm raised fish, fishermen, I guess, fisher people, and he talks about how they put this book together. So let me just play that.
Well, it is a sustainable seafood cookbook that is focused on recipes and stories throughout the coastal South. We There's a chapter on cocktails versus what most cookbooks have, I think, is a chapter on desserts. So we decided to lean into her Cassidy's creativity more and talk about how to start a great meal instead of how to end it. And um, yeah, we traveled to places that we've been before and places we haven't been. I mean, over the course of 3 years, we extensively toured the coastlines from North Carolina all the way to Texas, so the Southeast and the Gulf Coast, and just meeting people and just learning stories and doing that kind of like old school, like all of our head notes and our essays are about people and places. And it's not necessarily, it's an account of a place and a time, and we had a lot of fun doing that and took that idea very, like the responsibility of it very greatly in terms of this isn't, our creativity and our interpretations are up to us, but the book is a celebration of all these people, the foodways and the cultural history and the significance and the impact, the way of life.
What a super fun book to write.
I
You
know.
must have had so much fun researching it.
And I love the idea, instead of having a dessert chapter, he has a cocktail chapter.
Well, and so since you mentioned fishermen, or what you call people who are not men but also catch fish, I was in Alaska with the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute quite a while ago during salmon season, and met some women who fished and asked what I should call them, and they said fishermen. We're fishermen. So,
okay.
I mean, I don't know if it's universal, but this one fishing woman in Alaska said she was a fisherman.
Okay. Well, I guess you have to, ask each person what they prefer to be called.
Yeah, just like pronouns.
Exactly. So anyway, Sammy was a lot of fun to talk to, and it's still National Seafood Month. So people should get out and eat seafood and try and make sustainable choices.
In fact, do that all year round, not just October.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
I mean, seafood, again, really good for you. Usually sustainable if you're getting it in the U.S. I mean, we have strict regulations if it's American seafood, unless it's some sort of counterfeit shenanigan-ridden situation, which I'm sure occurs. If you are reasonably diligent, you can find sustainably sourced seafood, and it's really good for you. We all probably need more omega-3 fatty acids and
For sure,
lean protein and
delicious.
And
you mentioned swordfish and Chilean sea bass, but he was also very excited because bluefin tuna came off the red list, which
Okay.
meant, never, you shouldn't be eating it. It has to, regenerate and become populous enough so that people can fish for it again. And so just this year, it's now on the yellow list, which means proceed with caution, just like a yellow light. But you can eat it, and restaurants can serve it without feeling like they're depleting the supply. So I think he was very excited about that, because bluefin tuna is a really great fish. And even though it has, some restaurants have been serving it, they really weren't supposed to, but now they can.
Well, that's a wonderful success story. Because, I mean, I have a biologist friend whose attitude is they're going extinct, so you might as well eat them while you can. But he's a bit of a social Darwinist that way. But, if really nothing can be done and they're going extinct, screw it, have the last toro. But if they've actually come back that well, that's awesome. That's so good to hear. And I know it was always challenging with Pacific bluefin, because the Pacific Ocean currents are so complicated that it's hard to get a good handle on what's going on with the populations. But the Atlantic bluefin apparently were in trouble, and maybe they're coming back. I'll have to look into that. That's exciting. That's good to know.
Yeah. Well, so what else is happening this week?
I don't know.
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I'm finding some guests that I can interview for this coming week's podcast. I have a couple lined up. I'm not going to tell you who they are, partly because I've forgotten, and partly because it's a secret, and I'm sure they're interesting, and this is something that our beloved audience gets to look forward to next time.
Okay, well, great. Well, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Yes. Be well, everybody.
Control the kitchen chaos and streamline your back of house operations with Restaurant Technologies. Restaurant Technologies' total oil management solution is the end-to-end automated oil management system that delivers, filters, monitors, and recycles your cooking oil, taking the dirtiest job out of the kitchen and lets your employees focus on more important tasks. The total oil management solution helps prevent the burns, spills, slips, and falls that come with traditional oil management. Restaurant Technologies gives you and your employees peace of mind among the chaos of a commercial kitchen and can maximize efficiency for your business. And no upfront cost. Learn more about Restaurant Technologies and all the solutions they offer by visiting rti-inc.com or call 888-796-4997.